First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner. He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another edition here on the Eternal Insiders Podcast. We are powered by Fight HQ, the official uniform partner for Eternal MMA. As you can see, I'm joined by the man, Matt Bones Williams. We're here to talk about the card that was Eternal 92, the weekend just gone ahead of a massive weekend that was combat sports in Australia, obviously Eternal MMA. Here on the eve of UFC 312, what a weekend it was in combat sports. Matt Bones Williams was there, of course, for the Eternal 92 card in the commentary booth. Saw it live and in person. I saw it from the best seat in the house on my couch with a beer in my hand. But we're here to talk about the fights that were another fantastic card for Eternal MMA on what was, like we said, a massive weekend for mixed martial arts in Sydney, New South Wales. Brother, it's always good doing these ones, man. I'm really starting to enjoy these breakdowns that we're doing. You were there, of course, in person. Big weekend, mate. You went to both fights. You went to the UFC. You went to Eternal MMA. How was the weekend at large for you, man? It looked like a good time.
Yeah, it was such a good weekend, bro. Like, it was, I got to go up with my family as well. So my wife and my son up there. So we got to do some touristy stuff too. I've never really seen kind of Sydney as a tourist. I've been there a lot of times for combat sports in and out. But it was cool to walk around the city and be in the immediacy of all things UFC that were going on, and to get, you get a different energy from that side of the city, I feel, when there's a lot of people there for that event. It was cool to talk to a lot of the fans from Eternal MMA as I got to meet them walking around town. People came up and said hello, which was really cool. Some people from across the ditch, come over for the week. They make the whole weekend of it, come to Eternal, then they go to UFC the next day. So it was just awesome to be within that kind of sphere of all that good energy that was revolving around the combat sports for the weekend.
Yeah, I got a newfound appreciation for Sydney last time I was there for the last Eternal card that was there. I think the only times I've been to Sydney has been for sort of work, and every time I've gone up there, I haven't I don't know why I haven't enjoyed it, but I'm like, it's just not for me. But last time I was there, and like you said, like the vibe in the city and everything, and walking around, actually getting to see it, I actually really like Sydney. It's a good time, and it's good venue for the fights at the Kudos Bank Arena. Obviously, for this one, for Eternal MMA, went to the Rosehill Gardens racecourse, which is a new one there. Look, on TV, that looked like a good venue. The lights look good. Cage as well lit up. Looked like a decent-sized crowd. People seem to be into it. What was your sort of view on that venue?
Well, when you first walk in, the first thing that I appreciated about the venue was the magnitude of it. So everything's massive.
Yeah, it looks huge.
You're on the doorstep of this huge race course, and being Melbourne boys, we're accustomed to Melbourne race course, and that's the kind of magnitude you're talking about. Like manicured gardens and stuff out the front. The driveway is about 3,500 kilometers long, and then you walk into the venue itself. And it's vast, like real tall ceilings, real long. It's a big, long venue. When they flicked, I was there while they were setting up the cage. The cage took a long time to set up. It's Sydney's cage. And when they flicked the lights off, I was like, oh, man, this is going to be awesome. And the crowd piled in. I'm not sure what the gate was, but it was a big, big crowd and brought some good energy too. So I'm all about the Rosehill Gardens as a venue. I love to go back there. It's pretty as a picture.
No, it certainly looked like a very good venue. And I think I saw some videos of Trahair walking into the venue and that sort of thing. And like you said, it's the vastness of the arena looked incredible. So it was a cool, I guess, sort of like change of scenery for Eternal MMA, and to see sort of the events growing, the attendance. Like you said, I'm not too sure on the actual attendance figures, but very cool to see the growth for the brand there. We had 9 fights all told for this one. That's what I was whittled down to. But we had 2 title fights on the main card. 9 fights across the main card and the prelims as well. All professional fights for this particular card for Eternal 92. And kicked off in very typical Eternal MMA fashion with a 25-second knockout. Mason Nabetsu defeating Alexander Paniris. Just come in, both boys just looking to push the action. But, I mean, Mason Nabetsu just pulling no punches whatsoever. Like he caught, I think Alexander very early with a massive right hand from memory. And, just put him on Queer Street and hit him with another right hand, like as he was going down towards the canvas as well. It's a bit of a weird sort of stoppage. I'm not saying it was a bad stoppage or anything like that, but like it looked like the fight was maybe going to continue, and then the ref kind of came in and sort of waved it off. No complaints from Paneris there by the looks, but what a way to start the card with a bang. Mason Nobetsu shoring up his record to 2-2. The man out of Absolute MMA. What a cracking way to start the night, man. This is very typical, like I said, Eternal MMA. The first fight of the night always starts off with a bang. This was no exception for Eternal 92.
Yeah, it was an unusual start in that when the fighters got to the cage, the New South Wales Combat Sports Board didn't have the cut man there ready to go to Vaseline the fighters up. So poor old Mason, Simon Carson, and Sim Kikembo were just standing there, kind of twiddling their thumbs. That his walkout song
just left at the altar.
Left at the altar. And he was just looking at me like, I don't know, man. Yeah. So he probably spent more time waiting to be Vaselined up by the cut man than he did actually in the cage. The thing with Mason Nobetsu, I believe I would have said it in the preview, 'cause I'm a big believer in Mason. He's got an immense amount of talent. But the guys who've been fighting, Taser Malone on Pro Debut, crack a fight, like an absolute war, as long as it lasted. I think it went down to kind of midway through the third round. Taser got the best of him in that instance, but he went on to fight for the featherweight championship later on in the card. Then he took out Big Emmanuel Riddy, who we'll see later on in Perth next weekend. Big, tall guy, very, very dangerous. Mason took him out with low kicks from memory, and then he fought Brogan Stewart. So it's like, mate, he's had an absolute tough lineup to get into the Eternal ranks, and it was good to see him get a win in an emphatic fashion. Yeah, the right hand was right on the money, hard as anything. I was right on top of it. I think what made it unusual was that the referee was actually late to come in. Okay. So the right hand landed. It looks like the referee went to go in. He kind of hesitated. Panayra started to build himself back up, and then the referee went in and stopped. So it was strange timing, which I think made it just seem a little bit murky, where as if the referee, he was quite far from the action. If he had been right on top of it, he probably would have been in there a bit sooner. But it doesn't take away from the performance of Mason Nobetsu. It was a cracking fight. Featherweight division is starting to get hot right now. There's a lot of guys coming up through the featherweights. And I think coming into the latter part of this year, we'll see a lot of, if these guys like Mason keep knocking them together, it's going to start getting pretty congested up at the top. So exciting things for the Eternal Featherweight division.
No, and no doubt Alex Panayra will be looking forward to seeing the back of Absolute MMA, because he falls to 0-2 to start his pro career, and both of those losses were at the hands of the Absolute MMA boys. Of course, Alistair Voulders, we're speaking of guys coming through in the featherweight division for Absolute MMA, for Eternal MMA, like he's just another one on the rise as well. We've seen him recently fighting at Eternal 90 or Eternal 91, the card sort of to end the year. And now he falls to Mason Nobetsu to start, the first two fights of his career. But we'll take nothing away from Mason Nobetsu. I mean, he's 2-2 now, and he's traded loss, win, to sort of start his career and shore up that record. But I mean, you talk about a kill or be killed fighter. All four of his fights have now ended by KO, win or lose. So, you want to talk about entertainment in this division for Eternal MMA. Mason Nobetsu, I mean, you just talk about the fight that he had against Brogan Stewart, one of the best fights that I've ever seen for Eternal MMA. The one in which he did lose, of course, but I mean, just gave an incredible encounter himself. And look, sign me up anytime for a Mason Nobetsu fight, because he always comes in to put on a massive performance. So shout out to him for kicking off the card for Eternal MMA in the absolute right way that we know that Eternal MMA does. That set the table for Chris Ustianovsky versus Corey Sutcliffe. Now, this in the bantamweight division, I mean, you will talk about this better than me, but I mean, you want to talk about skills on display and technique, especially with the boxing side of the game. This was just an incredibly high-level matchup. Chris Ustianovsky getting the win done by decision. He bounces back now to 3-1 for his record. Of course, coming off that loss last year at that card to end the year for Eternal MMA, where he had that weight miss and then got knocked out in the first round. So he bounces back nicely, comes in, makes weight for this fight. Looks incredible and just shows off some of that elite boxing game that he has. Just the slick head movement, just the slick footwork that he's got. Training with Luke Pizzuti out of the Lions Den since the age of 6 years old, which you touched on during the commentary. And it just shows the level that he's got in his game and the big things that he can go on and do. Like Chris Usinovsky is just like this is high level stuff. And Corey Sutcliffe, you look at his record now, like now 2-4, and we touched on this. In the look ahead to the last in the last look ahead that we did to this card, but you look at his record and the guys that he's fought, like 2-4. Looking at his performance and looking at the guys he's fought isn't really reflective of the man that we saw in the cage against Chris Usinovsky. Like he's got some incredibly good skills in his own right, an incredibly good boxer too. And if you go and look at his Tapology page and have a look at like the guys that he's fought, every single one of these guys that he's fought up until fighting Chris. Like Chris was the first guy that he actually faced where he had the experience advantage. Like I think in his debut he fought a guy that was 2-0, and then he fought a guy that was 6-1 or something like that. And the next guy he fought had 12 pro fights or something like this, and he's fought all around the world. So you want to talk about two guys getting matched up finally that have kind of got similar skill levels and similar records. Like this was certainly one to look at and go back and watch the fight because it was incredible. Certainly was a grind. But yeah, Chris Usinovsky comes away with the win, and we've been high on Chris Usinovsky for a long time, man. I love that boxing. I love those rips to the body. I love that clean left hook that he's got. Just upstairs, downstairs, he's got it all. But good way for Chris Usinovsky to bounce back, get himself to 3-1, and continue some good action that we've got in the bantamweight division for Eternal MMA.
Yeah, this was an incredibly well-matched fight. It was an even fight, but Chris had some moments that probably set him apart in two of the rounds. Corey Sutcliffe was there the whole way through and had some great moments himself. It didn't play out how I thought it would play out. I was almost convinced that it would be contested on the feet for most of the fight. But what we saw was a lot of grappling exchanges, a lot of work up against the cage. It was a real grind. For me, it looked like the Lions Den Academy were trying to put some real pressure on Corey Sutcliffe, who's known for his ability to move his feet. He's a very slick mover, had great head movement himself, and slipped a couple punches beautifully to return fire in another volley against Usyk. But had some great wrestling too. The grappling exchanges were very even as well. It looked like when Usyk was able to put Sutcliffe on his back, he probably had the slight advantage for longer periods of time on the ground. But yeah, really even, and some interesting additions to the bow of Chris Usyk that I didn't expect to see. He shows he can mix it up everywhere. With really experienced guys. Of course, Sutcliffe spent a long time and just returned from coaching, being the head coach over at AKA in Goa in the southern part of India, a gym known for its wrestling acumen, and he showed he had that. I'll just touch on Sutcliffe because it's 2-4. It makes him a very tricky guy, I guess, to match because he is so good. His fight before Usyk, I believe, was with Trent Gurnham, who's a really experienced Australian fighter who crosses over to pro boxing, spent a lot of time over in Thailand and fought in Japan and all these places. So he's fighting the top guys. I'd love to see him back. I thought he looked excellent. He's back now with his hometown team at Furnace MMA in Launceston, and his brothers. I spoke to him and the boys out the back. They're great guys, great fellas. I really like those guys, and wish nothing for the best for Sutcliffe. Love to see him back at Eternal MMA in a bantamweight division that has a lot of options, I guess. And for Usyk, he's going to 3-1 and starting to climb his way up to the top of the division. There's some great fights to make there. Usyk and Alan Philpott for me, like going toe to toe, in a kickboxing fight, 4-ounce gloves. Now that gets me going. I'd love to see that. So, yeah, a lot of options for Chris, and off to a good start for 2025. Big things to come.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, because that was a thought that I had too, and we'll touch on this once we get to Alan Philpott and his performance towards the end of the main card. Of course, Alan Philpott getting the job done by round 1 KO, but he called for a title shot in May against the new bantamweight champion Kuya Ito. If that fight doesn't materialize, then yeah, I mean, look, let's get a bit of a title eliminator or something going between Chris Usynovsky and Alan Philpott in a kickboxing match, like you said, with 4-ounce gloves. Like, that'd be an absolutely incredible fight to see. I'd love to see that, but our cup runneth over with options in the bantamweight division, so no doubt like something good's going to come for either one of those guys. Chris Usynovsky, like, I've got no doubt we'll see him in a title fight sooner or later in the Eternal MMA bantamweight division. Just curious, like, we've talked about Chris a few times on the podcast and just talked about his skill level. We talked about the fact that he's been training with Luke Bazzuti since he's 6 years old. We know his skill level, still just 25 years of age. What do you sort of see as the ceiling for a guy like Chris Usynovsky with everything that he brings to the table and where he can kind of go in his career? The foundations are there for a fighter who can go all the way. I think, the trick for someone like Chris is round time and strength, cage time and strength of schedule to fight really good guys, experienced guys. For instance, Alan Philpott's 37 pro fights and learn and benefit from all that a guy like that can bring to the cage and kind of an information exchange and in the contest. Fight grapplers, fight black belts like Rod Costa and all these guys get all these different looks. And at his tender young age and with his the incredible foundations that he has with that cage time, with the strength of schedule, he can certainly go all the way. And I'm sure he'll be on the radar now of the UFC. We had the UFC second in charge there, Hunter Campbell, was cage side for the fights. And so no better platform to get up and perform against an experienced guy like Sutcliffe if you want to start making a case for yourself and get noticed. We went from an incredibly bright prospect in the bantamweight division in Chris Usynovsky to another incredibly bright prospect in the middleweight division in Christian Lapham, defeating Emil Jerry's in the middleweight division. Like we said, CMBT's Lapham, he's been a guy that's been talked about for so long. I remember, Brenton Mumford, his coach at CMBT, reaching out to myself and one of the other boys that we used to do the podcast with here, and this is before his pro debut, and saying, Christian White Lightning Lapham, this is a name you need to remember. Like, this is my new guy coming through. Like, he's the real deal. He's legit. And he's proven that every step of the way so far. Goes to 3-0 in his career to start his career perfect. In that middleweight division, he's won all 3 of his fights by unanimous decision. And I think that really does tell like a little bit of a story in terms of who he is as a fighter, because we touched on this in the card breakdown that we did prior to this fight, in that, and for me, his biggest attribute amongst his many tools that he's already got as such a young kid is his fight IQ and his poise and just his ability to kind of methodically think through these fights, not necessarily hunting a finish, but just looking to pick his moments. He's got not necessarily the same kind of stance as like a Robert Whittaker or anything like that, but he reminds me a little bit of Robert Whittaker in terms of how he kind of sits behind his jab and likes to use his footwork to kind of set up his techniques that, has been clearly drilled into him by Brenton Mumford. We talk about him being a middleweight, but he moves like a lightweight, and you can see that, Brenton Mumford style kind of written all over him. Now, that's not to say this wasn't a very close fight, because Emil Jerry's a big boy. He gave an incredible account of himself. This was a split decision win in the favor of Christian Lapham. Look, personally, I did think that Christian Lapham definitely won that fight. I was surprised that it was one of the other judges did see it towards Emil Jerry's, but I mean, this is a big test for Christian Lapham. Emil Jerry's, I mean, just looks like a Spartan warrior, man. You look at the physique, the length. Not too many guys make Christian Lapham look small. Not that he looks small, but I mean, he had the height and length advantage on Christian Lapham, and he dealt with this well. Just mixed up all facets of his game. Just continued to show off the many tools that he's got so early in his career. Just that nice left high kick that he's got, like no telegraph on it whatsoever, like the takedown defense and everything. So many really mature facets to his game. And while he's got no finishes in his pro career to date, like they're coming, because you can see those heavy hands that he wants to uncork, like when the time is right. But I mean, this is a really good way to keep things humming for Christian Lapham. In the middleweight division, certainly got a contender on our hands with this boy. He's a very interesting cat. Love his character. This was another incredibly entertaining fight. In the middleweight division, Christian Lapham defeats Emil Jerry's.
Yeah, and the number one tent salesman in all of Queensland, which is, an accolade not to be sniffed at. Very impressive.
Yeah, it goes that and then the fighting career for me. Like the number one 10 salesman, if that doesn't pan out, then we can maybe look at the fighting career.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I just about pitched a tent watching this fight. It was incredibly impressive. Two big boys slugging it out. It was really close. It was really close when I was standing there ready to, grab the winner. I wasn't sure which side of the cage I should stand on. The kicking game from Jerry's was ruthless. He was smashing the legs of Lapham, got him to change stances a couple of times, was having some great success there, has a very strong grappling game, does Jerry's, and as you say, he's big and was the bigger man in there, noticeably for me, as we see Lapham still starting to fill out and kind of that big man's body that takes a little bit longer for the middleweights to develop, I feel, but we'll start seeing that through this year and next year that Lapham will really fill out. Yeah, a really close fight. Lapham, he was a little bit stiff when he came out initially with his punching, but when he loosened into it, then we saw the strikes starting to flow. And I think that flow and the ability to have loose hips and loose shoulders is critical to the striking system of Brenton Mumford, and then passed down to Lapham, silky smooth. And a really good name in Jerry's, who I'm looking forward to seeing come back and fight. He's had a strong schedule himself. Ben Johnson, the former champion, in his second or third fight, he's been fighting some really good dudes. So with all that experience, we'll see Jerry's starting to have some breakthrough moments in the not too distant future, I'd imagine. But for Lapham, certainly the sky's the limit with age on his side. Been with the company since 16 years of age. I'm not sure what you were doing when you were 16, man, but I'm pretty sure I still had a paper run and still thought graffiti was cool. So, Lapham in the right place and taking good responsibility for the next step in his career. There's a lot of fights to make for Lapham, I feel. Middleweight in the past, it wasn't a division that had too much going on, but in recent times it's really started to pop off, and a lot of big hitters in that division. Guys like Bretag, who's shown the ability to jump back and forth. There's not too much doing up at light heavyweight. I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to his fight, but him and Lapham, that'd be an excellent fight. Stoddard, let's see what he does. He's alluded to going down to welterweight. That'll be another a fun fight to see those guys dust it up. But I'm sure if Lapham's coming out of this one healthy, that we'll be seeing him back in there pretty soon.
Yeah, at 16 years of age, I was getting punched in the head, but it wasn't in the cage for money or anything like that. That was just out at random festivals and things of that nature. So I can't pretend to understand what it's like to be a young kid getting the job done like Christian Lapham does. Still just 22 years of age. I mean, you just touched on there the middleweight division right now. Like we've talked about this recently. If you go back a couple of years ago, there wasn't really a lot of action happening. I mean, it was a lot of John Martin Fraser, Darcy Vendy. We had Matt Myers, kind of fighting each other a couple of times, and Darcy Vendy sort of inserts himself in a situation. And now we got guys like Cam Roaston. I mean, you just talked about Blair Bretag, obviously fighting at light heavyweight, but he's talked about being fluid and being able to go between the divisions as well. Alfred Stoddard, of course, you just mentioned there. Like we've got a lot of these good contenders there. I mean, we talk about Emil Jerry's as well. Like, you look at these guys are getting matched up against each other, and these are high-level fights. And you look at their records, like Emil Jerry's now 2-2, but I mean, he's got the skills to do some big things in his career as well. He's come up against a real surging prospect in Christian Lapham out of CMBT, and there's a lot of really cool things in his future, a lot of cool matchups we could potentially see. Without getting too ahead of ourselves, we've seen guys that have been put in title fights early in their career. You talk about a guy like Quillen Soulkill was in a title fight at just 3-1. I'm sure there's maybe 1 or 2 fights for Christian Lapham before that necessarily happens in the middleweight division, but he's certainly got the goods and he's putting it together. Again, just that poise, that fight IQ, and just managing the fight at his own pace and the maturity level is really something to behold. So let's see what comes next for him. But we just touched on that guy, Blair Bragg there as well. I want to put it on record that I want this man's nickname to be added onto the bill as No Time Blair Bragg or No Time Bragg, whatever you want to call it, because he gets the job done again in round one. KO inside, just over a minute. I think it was a minute and 34 seconds to be precise. But just come out and immediately put a pace, on Luke Skywalker Stockman. And he's moving around the cage like a lightweight, man. I mean, he just, in the short time that this fight went for the minute and 34 seconds, I mean, we saw so much from Blair Bragg. But I mean, the biggest thing that we see is just that power, the quickness, and just that thirst to get the job done early, like he's been doing his entire career. Like all of his finishes now have come, 1, 2, 3, 4 of his wins. All 4 of his wins have come by a round 1 KO, barely going past the 2-minute mark in one of those performances. I mean, you want to talk about another guy that's kill or be killed. 4-2 now for his record, and he's been finished in his other 2 fights too. So you want to talk about an entertaining man that wants to come in and put an absolute show for the crowd, but also have the skills to match it, not being reckless. Blair Bragg is certainly that guy. I did call at the end of the fight to keep the light heavyweight division rolling. He'd love to see, potential title fights in the future at light heavyweight division. I don't know how soon that's happening, depending on who else we've got in terms of contenders go. But he said he's more than comfortable, like we said, going back down to middleweight. So I'd like to personally see him keep going at middleweight, and that's more just for the contenders that we've got there. Like you could throw him in there with a couple of these boys right now and just really put on some fireworks. But look, again, Blair, No Time Bragg. Anytime he's back in the cage, like, sign me up. This is an incredibly good performance. Just an absolute line drive down the middle of a right hand to finish off Skywalker and just put an end to the night. What a performance from him. Good looking bloke, good on the mic, great teammate out of Team Compton Training Center, Blair Bragg. He was the goods at Eternal 92.
Yeah, he certainly was. I think he did. He did himself some real favors putting on that kind of performance right in front of Hunter Campbell. He's certainly one to watch, and with a string of first round finishes, as you say, the charisma on the mic, he's got it all. A smart fella too to boot. He showed off his Muay Thai, didn't he? He was mixing up the levels nicely against a much taller, rangier opponent, and Luke Stockman, putting Stockman on the back foot, narrowed up Stockman's stance, got him standing very tall. And when you're caught like that up against the cage, you're exposing yourself to some big shots. And he'd get Stockman's hands up, and he'd chop down hard on the leg, that beautiful Dutch style low kick, and he looked the goods. Stockman was kind of caught in the headlights, was starting to get real stiff. That aggressive start from Bragg put him in a real bad way, and it was a beautiful finish. I believe it's a straight right from Bragg that lined him up and saw him crash into the floor. An excellent comeback from Bragg to get the monkey off his back. Full credit to Stockman, man. Like he stepped up in that fight. He's been inactive through lack of opponents. He said he needs kind of cage time to kind of mature and kind of find his game. And Bragg was probably the same, but had that in his previous fight was Cam Rolston. So knows just what he's made of coming past the first round. And it was an awesome way to get it done. And then more impressive was the fact that Bragg managed to get up on the cage panels. I'm not sure if you noticed how big that New South Wales cage was, but when I came to the venue, I was like, mate, what is that? Is it just like my perspective of where I'm standing, or are those cage panels unusually high? They were huge, mate.
I didn't even
Sean
notice.
Etchell,
okay.
Shane Parker got up on one as well.
Yeah.
And when Bragg was up there, it felt like he was like King Kong on top of the world. It was a good look. A little slip up from me on the mic, just commending CMBT on the game plan. I meant Team Compton, of course.
Free promotion for CMBT on the mic there. It worked out well.
Oh my goodness, what an absolute flop! But yeah, it was cool. Loving doing. Hopefully, I get to do many more interviews with Bragg this year, and I'm sure I will. And I'll be nailing that one.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, you talk about myself as well, like trying to blurt out Blair Bragg on any number of podcasts that I've had talking about Blair. So, Yeah, it's their own fault. It's Blair's fault for being named Blair Bratag, and it's our Team Compton Training Centre's fault for having their abbreviation so close to CMBT. I'm making excuses for us here, but you look at TCTC, CMBT, like it all blurs together. I don't know. I mean, look, again, incredible gym, incredible fighter with Blair Bratag. What a stable of fighters they've got at Team Compton Training Centre. We'll talk about this, but you've got Tom Nolan obviously getting the job done too. In the UFC the next day. But you got guys like Don Marfan that are coming through. Obviously, David Martinez has been training down at Team Compton, and you see the striking showing off from those Team Compton Training Centre boys. Like, it's just written all over him. And Blair Bratag is just the next shining light in that system that they've got going on down there. So whether it's a light heavyweight or middleweight, whatever is next for Blair, no time Bratag. I'm calling it now. If the coach is listening, Blair, please add it in there. It's got to be a nickname. You're getting fights done in round one, man. You got places to be, clearly. So, but whatever happens next, man, sign me up for a Blair Bratag fight. Hell of a guy and a hell of a fighter. We got to Shane Parker versus Sean Etchell, a fight that was supposed to happen a little while ago that we finally got rebooked in the flyweight division. Shane Parker getting the job done in round 3 via the rear naked choke. This was a fight. Sean Etchell coming in, obviously with a 4-fight losing streak, and it's been sort of his kryptonite has been the submissions in the latter part of Etchell's career, and Shane Parker certainly looked to exploit that. And I mean, a guy that's a former a Commonwealth Games wrestler as well. I mean, it was sort of the writing was kind of on the wall there. The fight started off at a pretty blistering pace, and Etchell looked good to start with. But Shane Parker coming out and getting the job done. He decided to kind of mix things up. I think he said to you in the post-fight speech that Etchell wanted to try him out with his wrestling, so he thought he'd try him out with his striking. He matched him pretty well there. But good way for Shane Parker to get the job done. He did mention that he had a fairly short training camp for this one due to some injuries. Only had 3 weeks to prepare, so pretty impressive to come up against a guy like Sean Etchell. Sean Etchell now 7-7 in his career, but we've got to keep in mind that Sean Etchell still just 31 years of age, and I'm only mentioning that because this is not to take away from Shane Parker. Like, Sean Etchell is a high-level guy, a former 2-time Eternal MMA champion in the flyweight division and the bantamweight division. So this is a real feather in the cap for Shane Parker. Out of rival Jim, who moves to 6-6 in his own right in his career. Had a little call out after the fight. He wants to stay active, but this was a good, entertaining little scrap from Shane Parker and Sean Etchell.
Yeah, dude, this fight was sick. It was awesome. I think he got him with an arm triangle. I'll correct you there. I think he got him with a
my apologies. He did too. He had an arm. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah.
Yeah,
my notes are just
before that, he was attacking the rear naked choke a lot.
Yeah, they had that little scramble where, like, from memory, like Sean was going to submit, they're trying to submit him, and then it kind of scrambled, and then Shane Parker ends up, and then tries the rear naked choke, and then goes to the arm triangle. So it all happened so quickly,
Yeah, and one of the things that I was really impressed with was Sean Etchell's rear naked choke defense. It's always been his kryptonite, but he was looking great. And it actually forced at one stage. He forced Parker to bail out and transition to the armbar, which is a really nice transition. And dude, I actually put the mic down and started getting ready to get in the cage to do the interviews because it was so tight. Just showed how much Etchell still wants this, that he was able to fight out of those positions. So there's plenty of times there where you can just pick the hand up and tap 3 times and it's all over Red Rover. But he was in it to the last minute. That hidden arm choke was super tight, man. Like, you can hear me on the commentary, I'm sure, saying, that's locked up. That one signed, sealed, and delivered because he had a great angle. He's got an excellent squeeze, does Parker, and he threw everything into that. So there was no way out of that one. I think Etchell threw up and tried to catch his leg to try and create some space for his carotid artery to start pumping some blood up to the brain, but it was all she wrote. Interesting game plan coming in. Like in the early exchanges, Etchell looked like he had the edge in the striking, which most people probably would have assumed. Parker was on the back foot. But somewhere along the lines, Etchell came out trying to prove a point, mix it up in the wrestling. His wrestling looked good too, man. Yeah. There was some really good exchanges there where Etchell was able to come up on top. He got some takedowns on the former Commonwealth Games Australian representative, a guy who's been a national gold medalist many times, Oceania gold medalist, and represented Australia at the highest level. So Etchell showing that he can do it everywhere. But how was Parker coming back after the second round, throwing some big punches.
I love
he
that.
just loves to scrap. I think that
does.
guy. We could chuck him in versus Blair Brettag, and he'd probably sign the dotted line and bring a step ladder, and he'd be off he goes. He just loves to scrap. 27 years in combat sports and still going strong. Good to see two veterans dusting it up. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about like wanting to scrap anyone at any time. I mean, one of 14 siblings, I believe I read on his fight information, like second oldest. So no doubt that he had to grow up like scrapping for anything he could. So I don't doubt that Shane Parker is ready for anyone at any time. Like I said, he did have that call out towards the end there. I couldn't quite make out who he called out. Do you recall who it was? Did you catch the name? I thought he said Tucker someone or something like that. I don't know if he was referring to a nickname. I didn't recognize the name, but he did have a call out at the end of the fight. I don't know if you caught wind of what that was.
No, I can't remember now.
Yeah,
Maybe we can look it up, chuck it in the comments or something. It's I always have, like, when I went to go and do that interview, I was a bit thrown off because my mic didn't work, and I had to toss it over, and my Timu mic, I had to go and grab John Aiello's, and Parker gave me the hurry up. He's like, "Get your shit together, mate." And I was like, "Dude, it was creepers. I'm fighting it from all angles here." So
you might have been thirsty. He was keen
I can't
to go.
remember, but hey,
you might have been thirsty. He was keen to get out for a drink.
Yeah, well, him and me both. But mate, I don't care whoever he fights next. I'm signing up for the Showtime.
No, definitely sign us up for that anytime. Shane Parker, what a gamer he was, gets the job done over an Eternal MMA mainstay legend in Sean Etchell. Interesting to see what comes next for Sean Etchell. Again, still just 31 years of age. Hard to believe. Certainly see what comes next for him in his career, whether he wants to keep at it. If he wants to keep at it, he's still got the skills there. He just came up against a dog in Shane Parker that was ready to get the job done, and get the job done he did. That set us up for the return of Cam Rouston defeating Alfred Stoddard in the middleweight division. Of course, Cam Rouston out of City Kickboxing in New Zealand. We just saw Cam Rouston face off against the man we just mentioned there in Blair Brettag last year on that Eternal 91 card when he got the job done by rear naked choke. Comes back into the middleweight division, looking to keep himself active. Obviously, he's not too far removed from that performance on Dana White's Contender Series in which he did not win. He wants to stay active and he wants to get himself back to that spot. Had a fantastic promo on the mic at the end with you in the cage there. Like, that was just electric stuff. Like, that was shades of Michael Chandler there on the mic. What was it? Darcy Vendy, Matt Myers, John Jones, Conor McGregor, Godzilla, King Kong, Satan himself. It doesn't matter. All I need to know is when they sign on the dotted line, they better go backstage and spit shine that silver medal because they're getting second place. I had to write that one down because there's no way I was going to remember it, but that was just one of the call-outs of all time for my money. Just absolutely nailed it. No ounce of fat on that promo whatsoever. Didn't trip over himself once. Can't believe it. I mean, he wanted to look good there in front of Hunter Campbell. I mean, he had the performance to match, and then he had the promo to complement that at the end of the fight. But just another well-rounded performance from Cam Rouston. The first time that he's won a fight and hasn't finished the fight. Unbelievably, through his 10 wins, every single one of those have been finishes. Every time I look in his pre-fight notes, he's always saying he's going to win by lay and pray on the ground. And I mean, look, this wasn't lay and pray, but this is the first time he's been to decision. So he's been full of shit the entire time. He's always been pulling the wool over our eyes because he's a finisher of the highest caliber, but came up against a real tough Alfred Stoddard, a real game opponent. But he just mixed up everything so well. You'll talk about this better than me, but everything was on show from the footwork, just his defensive head movement. You can see that City Kickboxing style in him in terms of, his striking ability, but he's a long-rangey guy that wants to grapple first and foremost, but he uses his very, very competent striking, that CKB style, to lead him into where he wants to get the fight, and that's on the ground, and that's where he cooks his opponents. But he moves to 11-3 in the middleweight division. You might have mentioned that he might potentially have his eyes on that Darcy Vendy versus Matt Myers fight coming up, but it looks like he's game for all opponents. But Cam Rouston continues the absolute role that he's been on since that Dana White's Contender Series fight. What did you see in this one, man? This was another good fight.
Yeah, look, that was a hopeful call for me that he would have his eyes on the Vendy Matt Myers, because I wouldn't be at all surprised
if he's gone,
if he snapped up before then. Like whether it be a straight signing or whether it be Dana White's Contender Series again. He showed in that fight just at the level he is. He's a high caliber athlete, and he's ready for the big time. and we just got to enjoy him for as long as he's around, and then we'll be enjoying him from afar, because he's certainly a showman. I love how he comes out chasing the finish. He was hunting the finish the whole way through that fight. He's unrelenting. His striking was really accurate and specific. He's so well drilled in terms of where he chooses to fight in the cage, and how he fights. He fights differently when he's got his back up against the cage as opposed to taking the center. He knows how to, if someone gets inside his range, he knows how to close and squash all that distance. And he's got excellent wrestling. That single leg, hit outside single leg that he hit twice on Stoddard was top notch. And Stoddard kind of got caught rather than trying to create space and frame to get back to his feet. He's trying to chase the guillotine, and you're just not going to get it against Cam Roston. Cam Roston pummeled the legs exceptionally in that fight, just nice and flowy, to maintain position, but also to improve position, to get to the back, to expose the back. And he just had Alfred Stoddard working the entire time, and Stoddard started to gas. And when that happened, Ralston just increased the pressure. Excellent ground and pound. Stoddard always dangerous. Of course, he's always going to be dangerous. He cut Ralston off his back up in the heel line. It's a pretty big old cut, but didn't affect the fight. Just affected my suit. But the dry cleaners at Surf Coast Dry Cleaners taking care of that right now. You'd be,
did you catch some strays? Did you? Okay, yeah, all right.
Caught a few strays on the I Love Ugly linen blazer there, mate. But yeah, he's good, man. He's super good. Dana White's Contender Series, the start of the year, this kind of time of year, they start to kind of figure out who they're going to have for kick off the program around June. And I'm not sure when the UFC are back in Oceania, this part of the world. I haven't had a look at that, but yeah, don't be surprised if you see Ralston coming into the prelims on that. If not, Dana White's Contender Series. But failing all else, Darcy Vendy, Matt Myers, there'd be a big man darkening the doorway of the middleweights in this country until that point.
Yeah, there's certainly options, and selfishly, I would love to see that him get the winner of whoever that might be between Darcy Vendy and Matt Myers. Like, that'd be an incredible matchup. But whatever happens next for Cam Rouston, he certainly deserves it. He's now on a 3-fight winning streak, 9-10 in his last 9 wins from his last 10 fights. And he's just everything he's showing off. Like, he must be just, for all appearances, one of the most well-rounded fighters that we have fighting for Eternal MMA, or certainly in the Oceanic region at large as well. One of the main training partners, of course, for Israel Adesanya, helps him prep for his fights. But he's got so many good tools, like just a tall, rangy type fighter, an interesting kind of body type for a guy that loves to take the fight to the ground and wrestle. But he just uses all of his tools to chain everything together. You can tell he's a high fight IQ fighter, and just gets the job done the way that he needs to get the job done, however that might be. Again, this is the first time that he's ever been to decision when he gets the job done. But he's a very entertaining guy at the same time. Interesting cat to talk to. Like we said, hell of a call out at the end of his fight, or just a hell of a promo that he cut. So whatever he gets next, it better be something good, because he can't have a performance like that. You can't get back into the win column like this. You can't go back in a 3-fight winning streak and then just have a moment like that at the end of the fight and not get something special next, whether that's Dana White's Contender Series, whether that's a potential title fight here in Eternal MMA, whether that's getting signed to the UFC next. Cam Rouston deserves big things. Shout out to him. What a man, hell of a fighter as well. That led us to Alan Philpott getting himself back in the win column against Tomoya Hirakawa via first round finish, KO over his opponent in the bantamweight division. Philpott, must be said, did miss weight and forfeited 50% of his purse. But, always an entertaining fighter. He always brings with him a massive following, which they had in Sydney. Of course, he is training in Sydney at Lions Den, so we always see the turnout for Alan Philpott. Of course, he makes enemies everywhere he goes, does Alan Philpott, but you can't say there's another man more entertaining on the mic, in the pre-fight lead-up to the post-fight speeches to everything. Alan Philpott is a guy that you want here. A massive fight record. I think you said something like 37 pro fights now on his record. And must be said, like, I don't know if this is the first time that he's missed weight, but not a guy that I believe that I've seen personally. I can be told otherwise, but it usually has issues with that, especially with someone that has had such a strength of schedule for Alan Philpott. Was obviously remorseful for that, but does get the job done. Most importantly, calls for a title fight with Kuya Ito in May. Whether that happens or not, I'm not too sure. I'd love to see him fight Chris Ustinovsky, like we said. So let's see if we can get some influence in the matchmaking there. But Alan Philpott gets the job done in the bantamweight division. Just absolutely lights him up inside round one. Hell of a finish. Well done, Alan Philpott.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. I ended up at the next day at UFC 312. I ended up in the same kind of toilet rotation, back and forth with some of his Irish supporters, which was a super hard case. He's got fans everywhere, man, even at the urinal either side of me, which was a little bit uncomfortable. Damn. But yeah, it was cool to see him back in tip top Super Ali form. And Hirakawa was good, man. Like he came out. He is like we knew he was. It was awesome to see him. 37 years old, man. That guy's still fast and strong and competitive. He's the real deal, man. I think one of the things that really made a difference in this fight was how low into his stance Hirakawa sat as Southpaw versus Orthodox, and I said on the broadcast that's something that we expect to see often from Japanese fighters from the shoot boxing styles. They'll sit very low. Wrestling's a big part of their how fights are appraised over there. So they'll have the low stance. They tend to be very box heavy and very long in their linear in their stance too. And Super Ali Philpott did a great job of using his kicking game to batter up Hirakawa, and then was switching stances, using a short right hook to catch Hirakawa as he came past that kick, and tagged him a number of times. Hirakawa had good moments too, though. He had some really good shots. Those little exchanges, those fast little flurries that they were having on the inside. There were some good moments for both lads in there, but it was Philpott switching back with the right hand that created the opportunity for the left kick, which was a kick that I don't believe he had thrown previously in that round. He'd been sticking with the right kick from the Orthodox to Southpaw, Hirakawa being the Southpaw, and was battering him with that. The right hand had been landing. He faded back into Southpaw and let that left head kick fly as Hirakawa was ducking in and already low in the stance, Hirakawa. And it was a big old connection, man. And you need one to knock out those Japanese fighters because they've got thick old skulls. It was a great finish, man. First round for Super Ali. Like I said, on the plates of meat, that guy's hard to beat. And from Northern Ireland to the Emerald City, he made it look pretty. It was good to see him back.
Good to see him back indeed. I mean, you talk about that finish as well, looking and throwing that left kick. To me, in the moment, it looked like he was trying to throw a kick to the body, but it was because Hirakawa kind of ducked off. It kind of caught him in the head. So I don't know. How did you interpret that? Did you think he was trying to get up high and get him in the head, or do you think he was going to the body? Like either way, like sweet knockout. But it was two things there. It was an incredible technique, but it was also Hirakawa kind of ducking off to the side to his own demise there. Brilliant finish either way.
Well, at a higher level of striking, I don't want to give away too many secrets, because within Muay Thai at the highest level, you don't really kick the body. So you aim at the wrist of the glove, which takes you away from the hip and the elbow, which are where you can damage your foot. In our sport, in Muay Thai, they don't score high. Now in MMA, at a high level, guys will kick there, because if you're ducking in to shoot, if you're throwing a punch, then that exposes the neck. And head kicks are, specifically you should be aiming at the neck. And Thai, it's kang ho. You're aiming for the neck. That's where the knockout is, unless you like walking around on crutches for the week. Kicking the head is like going up and kicking a cannonball. It's so if you're specifically aiming at that part of the body, then you will catch guys ducking occasionally and clean them up. So whether he's going for the head kick or is just staying consistent with that lane of the kick, either way, that's smart fighting and a knockout that he'll remember for a long time. I think it was pretty from Philpott.
Brilliant insight from Matt Bones Williams, giving away some trade secrets there. I love the insight, man. I learned so much, talking about these side of things. And, I know bits and pieces of what's going on, but in terms of some of the nuances and that sort of things is why I need you, my guy, to be able to kind of break it down for us. But again, well done, Alan Philpott. Hell of a finish, entertaining fighter, gets himself back into the win column, bouncing back almost a year to the day since he had the title fight against Rod Coster, in which he was unsuccessful in. So he'll look to keep busy. Obviously, he's a very busy fighter. 37 pro fights for Alan Philpott. No doubt he's going to shoot out the other side of 40 and probably 50. He's going to keep going forever. I still don't think he's too old. I can't remember how old he is, but I think maybe 34, 35 years of age, something like that. I could be getting that completely wrong, but he's still got the goods. Looking forward to seeing what comes next for him. But we had the fight of the night, which was the Eternal MMA Featherweight Championship fight between Sebastian Salai versus Taser Malone. What an incredibly good fight this was. Sebastian Salai obviously had a freestyle MMA, originally capturing the title in that four-man featherweight Grand Prix through Eternal 86 and Eternal 87 when he defeated Gabriel Schlupp in the first round of that, went on to defeat Dim Skillies at Eternal 87 to capture the title for the first time, previously held by his teammate Justin Van Heerden at Freestyle MMA. He goes on to defend it for the first time against Taser Malone, who was coming in 4-0 in this fight. Taser Malone, another one of the guys out of CMBT who's been with Eternal MMA for so long, just like Sebastian Salai. This was such a fascinating matchup. I mean, we can say that about almost a number of fights that were on the card, but this was truly a stylistic matchup to really sink your teeth into. Sebastian Salai, obviously with that karate-based style, and Taser Malone with that wrestle pressure-heavy style that he's got. He's named the Machine for a reason. Incredibly entertaining fight from start to finish. Sebastian Salai, I think he's only got one finish in his career so far. This went to decision. But I mean, look, for the style that he's got and the power that he possesses in his hands and the IQ that he's got and the poise that he's got in his game, no doubt we're going to see finishes in his future. You talk about Hunter Campbell obviously being their cage side. He would have been one of the boys that he was obviously interested in seeing, given that Sebastian Salai is the champ, now moving to 8-1. Stated after the fight that he's, of course, looking to move on to the UFC. We'll see if he ends up defending the title. We'll see if he ends up in Dana White's Contender Series. A lot of cool things on the horizon for Sebastian Salai, but I talked to him before the fight, and he said first things first, he wants to defend the title. He wants to become the number one featherweight in the country, and then he wants to move on to the UFC. And he certainly called his shot after the fight, and he called it with his performance. But listen, this is something that could have been for me, performance of the night for Sebastian Salai. Ended up being fight of the night because of Taser Malone. He could have been finished in the second round. That would have finished a lot of guys that have more experience. That would have finished a lot of guys in the UFC. That would have finished 99.9% of people. I'm talking about the body shot that he took in the second round that he just absolutely ate, that I thought he was going to go down and get finished. And I think that was a really key moment in the fight. I think Seb even alluded to this after the fight, where he thought this was going to be the end, and then slowly Taser starts coming back into the fight. This isn't the end of the fight. It gets to the third round. It gets to the fourth round. Taser keeps coming forward. He's breathing heavy, but he's wearing on Sebastian Salai. He's getting his own takedowns. He's starting to have his way. So the mentality shift is going the other direction all of a sudden. And I think that's just an absolute credit to Sebastian Salai that he gets to show off across 5 rounds. He gets to show off that he gets to kind of come through adversity from almost finishing a fight in the second round to then go through a guy like Taser Malone and still come at the other side, turn to his wrestling in the 5th round and just mix up the martial arts, as it were. He knew he had to make a bit of a change. I imagine he probably used the wrestling to kind of stifle the offensive wrestling of Taser Malone and kind of just really get the job done towards the end and win 3 of those 5 rounds. Split decision from memory, I think it was for that fight. It was split decision, wasn't it? Yeah, one of the judges saw it the way of Taser Malone. I don't know about all that. I do believe that it was certainly 3 rounds to 2 in favor of Sebastian Salai. But listen, stock goes up for both of these guys. This was a potential big coming out for Taser Malone, and I still think it certainly was. He'll be back. This is not a performance to hang his head over. He'll go on to to big things certainly. But the moment was for Sebastian Salai defending his featherweight title for the very first time. Moves to 8-1. One of Freestyle MMA's greatest prospects. Can't wait to see what comes from him next. But just at large, we were the winners. What an incredible fight in the featherweight division for the Eternal MMA Featherweight Championship.
Yeah, dude, what a crazy fight, man.
So good.
In the build-up, I said the 5-round format suits Taser Malone better than any other guy. in Australia. It just the way that he weaponizes his cardio. And I referenced guys like Devashili, who he might drop the initial rounds, but if he's still there in the third, man, he's going to come back and he's going to just start running you over. Guys like Benavidez, I'm not sure if you're into the boxing. Benavidez does this too. He'll often drop a couple of the early rounds, but then, over the next 5 or 6 rounds, he just slowly ramps up the pressure and guys start to cave. One thing, if that's your kind of style, you need willpower. You need to be resilient both in the mind and in your physical composition, your body be resilient to taking strikes. And Taser had to walk through hell to get through the second round. I didn't think he was going to make it out of that round. I didn't. I may have even said it on the commentary. In retrospect, I should know better, but he was just so injured to that body. And it kind of comes down to the strategic differences between both the camps' approach to this fight. Soleil showed something different than I've seen from him before. He came out in the first and the second trying to finish the fight, and that's not consistent with the previous performances of Soleil. He seems to be of the mindset that he'll take the finish if it comes, and he just puts on a clinic in terms of risk aversion, making high probability decisions, and always putting himself in a position of advantage over his opponents, and kind of putting it in cruise control. And for me, as a fight fan, I find that equally as impressive as coming out and getting a finish. A dominant victory where you just keep it in second or third gear and you just put on a clinic, for me, is as equally as impressive as a big finish. But he obviously was coming out trying to make a statement, right? And I understand that too. And he certainly did. Like, he did everything he could possibly do, I feel, to get Taser out of there. That was the perfect approach to trying to get a finish. Taser plays a very high guard when he's caught up against the fence, almost like an 11's guard, but he does kind of roll with it and fire back. And he kind of teeps at the front kicks at the legs to push the hips back of, or in this case, Soleil. So started targeting the body and doubling up to the body, coming and leading up, doubling up to the body, which is an impressive skill, something that boxers can do quite aptly. Not something we see a lot in MMA. And Taser was so hurt, man, and did a good job to disguise it initially. Did a fantastic job of creating space and then with the front kicks, and then suffocating the space to initiate the grapple when he was almost out of there. But through sheer heart and determination, he got back in that fight. And I think there was a moment at the end of the third round where he got a big takedown and managed to get a dominant grappling position. And I said, that I think that's what Taser, exactly what the doctor ordered for Taser, was just that breath of confidence. And if you give him a sniff of confidence coming into those later rounds, he's going to be able to pick up, because he's got so much self-efficacy, believes in himself so much. And he brought it home really strong, which made it the fight of the night. That, the fourth and the fifth round and Taser's comeback is what made it the fight of the night. Taser's approach to chop the legs early was the correct approach. I feel like if you've got a guy who can move better than anybody, then you start chopping away his legs. Think about Emil Jerry's versus Lapham, heavy leg kick approach. You go away and you try and take away those things from them so they don't work as well in the later rounds when you want to start implementing your game. I think where Taser probably, in retrospect, when he looks back at this fight, he was selling those. You could see the leg kicks coming. He was taking a big movement to his right hand side and then trying to come through with them. He got some good connections. He hurt Soleil's leg big time, but I think in retrospect, the CMBT team will be looking at ways they might have been able to creep Taser, like fake Taser over to the right hand side to make Soleil linear so they could attack his leg, but had some good success there. An incredible fight. a great finish as well. Soleil was very tired coming into that fifth round. I could tell there was a kind of Taser he recovers so well on the stool, man. Like in that break, you look over at Taser, the way he goes back to the stool, he leaves everything in the round, even in the fourth and the fifth, even in the third and the fourth, but he's able to go back to the stool and kind of get his wind back about him on the stool. Whereas coming into the later round, Soleil had put so much into the earlier rounds trying to get the finish that he was pretty laboured coming into the fifth. And for him to go to his wrestling game, I think, that kind of grind, that kind of facing that kind of adversity in a fight, I think that adds to your stock as well. Like I think Hunter Campbell seeing that going, oh man, this guy's gritty as hell, as well as being a 8-1 2-time defending champion who can strike with the best of them. He can do it all. I think that adds a lot to your stock. And whatever happened next for Soleil, I'm going to be watching it, man, because I'm a huge fan of that guy.
I'm a huge fan of both guys, but yeah, you talk about Sebastian Soleil, and it's wild to me. I know he's got that kind of karate base, and he fights in that very kind of methodic style, but the power that he has in his hands, it just shocks me that he doesn't have more finishes on his record. I mean, you just talk about how hard he kind of came out in those opening couple of rounds. I mean, those punches were cracking, man. Like, it was loud on TV. I can only imagine like how loud it was in the building, and like, if he just caught just a little bit more flush with Taser, like, it might have, had him a bit more on skates than what he did. I mean, again, you talk about a guy like Taser and his conditioning, man, and everything that he's put himself through, the dedication to the game, sleeping outside of the gym, working on his body, like working on his skill set. You talk about the adversity that he can go through outside the cage, the adversity that he goes through inside the cage. You look at his previous performance that got him here against Ethan Mitchell. If you just looked at the faces of both of those fighters from that fight, you'd swear Taser Malone lost that fight because his face was all busted up. His eye looked like an absolute mess. But like, that was another fight where he potentially could have given up him, but he just refused to give up. And this is why he's such a popular fighter, or one of the reasons why he is such a popular fighter, and one of the reasons why he was in this championship fight. And he damn well deserved to be in this championship fight. And I know we're going to see him in another championship fight in the future. He's just a guy that has a relentless pace. He came up against a guy in Sebastian Soleil that does have the experience factor, and he lent on that experience factor in that fifth round when he went to the wrestling and got the job done the way that he needed to finish off. He would have been cognizant of the fight being that close, and he eked it out. But Taser Malone, super respectful after the fight. It was a split decision. He must have had a bit of hope that he was getting the job done. As soon as it gets announced for Seb, puts his hands together. You just know in his mind, he's like, well, okay, that was what it was. Time to move on, time to go back to the drawing board, work on some of the things that you mentioned that maybe he needs to look at with his team and bounce back. But the night was for Sebastian Soleil. Moves to 8-1, now a 7-fight winning streak after losing just his one fight. I believe his second pro fight. Looked incredible. Doesn't get the finish, gets a split decision, but I mean, like you just said, in front of Hunter Campbell, showing everything he can do, showed off the skill set, showed off the cardio, showed off the heart, showed off the maturity, showed off the fight IQ. There were so many things that he showed off. Whether his next fight is in Eternal MMA, defending the belt again, whether it's on the Contender Series, just another one of these guys that you can kind of plug and play in whatever comes next for him. Sebastian Soleil, just a massive gamer, huge dedication to the game. Cannot wait. Whatever comes next for him, he deserves everything because he's put on incredible performances for Eternal MMA. He's an incredible champion, and he's going to do big things in his future. So it's go time for Sebastian Soleil. Let's see what comes next for him. That was the co-main event to David Martinez. Stephen Costello versus David Martinez. David Martinez becoming, I believe, I'm happy to be fact corrected on this, but I think the first 3-time Eternal MMA champ. He's got it done across 2 divisions, of course. He came in previously fighting as a lightweight, being a former 2-time Eternal MMA lightweight champion. Moves up to welterweight in his last fight after some weight cutting issues. Got the job done against Brenton Mumford at Eternal 90, and then sets it up nicely for this title fight against Ireland's Stephen Costello. Gets the job done by submission in the third round. First of all, massive size difference between these two guys. You touched on this in the broadcast. I mean, Stephen Costello coming in looking damn near like a light heavyweight. David Martinez, I think you said as he was coming out, you thought, oh, he looks good as a welterweight. But I mean, Stephen Costello, just an absolute massive human being. And that was evident during the fight. We know the way David Martinez likes to fight. We know he likes to use his striking to set up his wrestling. He tried a number of times to take Costello down and just eventually did get him down once he could deal with the massive size of the body that is Stephen Costello. But does get the job done by a rear naked choke and becomes a 3-time champion. The fight started off. Let's talk about the fight sort of from start to finish. The fight starts off at an incredible pace. Costello looking to come out and just put bombs on him. Hits him with a hard right hand that I think David touched on after the fight. Had him waking up in Ireland and knew he kind of had to come back to Australia and get the job done. Straightens up Costello with, I think, a jab. And then from there, it was just a lot of Martinez. It was a lot of the Martinez game, using the strikes to set up the wrestling. Interesting point to this, and we'll talk about this shortly, but I did actually hear from Stephen not too long before he jumped on the pod. Apparently came into this fight with a very nasty chest infection. I actually did see the photos and a video from Stephen. Some of the stuff that he was coughing up, man, just like cherry-sized globules of, just sounds disgusting, but just crap and snot off his chest. Said that he's not looking to make excuses necessarily or anything like that, but that he came into this fight feeling, in his words, as weak as a kitten. He didn't want to let anyone down. He's grateful for the opportunity to come back over and fight. Said he'd love to get back over here and get himself another fight, wants to insert himself back into the title picture. I don't know if that's happening necessarily anytime soon, but he'd love to give himself another shot because he just did not feel like, he came into this one certainly anywhere near 100%. And that certainly factors in against a guy like David Martinez, who does not give you an ounce to rest. And you saw going through the second round into the third round that he was wilting. Now, whether that's anything to do with Costello's cardio in general, look, I'm not too sure. It's the first time we've seen him fight for Eternal MMA. But yeah, it does look like a nasty chest infection certainly played a part. But that's certainly to take nothing away from David Martinez, because I've got no doubt, even with a 100% healthy Costello, David Martinez could still get the job done in this way. Not to say that Costello couldn't win the fight, but I mean, this was a David Martinez performance. The fact that he's getting the job done against these guys that are bigger than him in the way that he does it, it's just, I never see David Martinez fighting any other way. It's just head down, does what he needs to do, gets the job done by submission. 4-fight winning streak, three-time Eternal MMA champion. David Martinez, what a performance.
Yeah, man, he's so good. He's so good.
So good.
He's so good. At welter, I reckon he looks like people keep bringing up David Martinez. He's probably more of a lightweight. No, he's not. He's not more of a lightweight because he kept missing weight there. And he looks good as a welterweight, and he's winning as a welterweight. He's the champion. He looks good as a welterweight. He's filled out like one. He's thick as hell, man. Intelligence wise, he's obviously quite a witty guy. But he carries a lot of weight in his jaw. He carries a lot of weight in his butt and his thighs. He's a big guy, and his big back that suits his style. So you get these welterweights who are more compact, and it suits their kind of in the pocket jab, hook, low kick game, and wrestle game. So he's a welterweight for me. Just Costello is just ginormous, but there's a trade-off, man. Like, if you're that big, you're gonna have what we saw, which is power in the early rounds. Of course, you're gonna hit really hard, and that cross that Costello threw, it was a bread and butter cross. It was accurate, but that's the effect that it has. If you're a welterweight and you punch someone and you hit them in the face with a cross, and you're that big, it's going to have that effect. And we saw Martinez stumble back. Taneda, this might be over before it begins, but Martinez hit him with this jab, this stiff jab that we know he has from perfect foundations, and it changed the course of the fight, man, like a jab in the first round. It smashed Costello's nose and changed the momentum. Costello started backing up. Martinez moved across the cage with good head movement, and then initiated his grappling game. And like I said, welcome to Martinez's world. This is what he does so well. That wrestling system of Martinez is top notch, and it's what's seen him beat guys like Becker, who's one of the best guys at doing just that outside of David Martinez. The wrestling system, the big lats, the hard jab and the low kicks. That's Becker, but Martinez bested him. He did it to Joblin, one of the more experienced guys in Oceania. The list goes on. The difference that I'm seeing now in Martinez since cross training between Dunstan's and Team Compton's is that there is a noticeable improvement in his striking. And I feel like he was getting great coaching, of course, at Dunstan's, but the room at Team Compton's, the sparring that he's getting is probably improving all that timing and the little looks, that happens to guys. Like Martinez has been around such a long time. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can. And by putting him in that room with like Bretag, Elliot Compton, Don Marfan, like Nolan, like all these guys, if you're sparring with those guys, they're going to keep you really honest, and you're going to start ironing out the creases and needing to work really hard to land your strikes. Martinez head movement and ability to hit in combination and not just lead, but counter back and land was so impressive, man. Like he looked the full package, and he is. He's certainly one of Australia's top guys across all weight divisions. Now 31 years old. Is it too late for Martinez? Well, I don't know. I hope not for him. But in the cage, on the mic now, as awkward as he is, he's hilarious, and he speaks well, and he's entertaining. I love the Martinez show. As for Costello, man, it's a shame to hear he had that chest infection. It's he looks great. I hope we get to see him back on Australian shores and fighting for Eternal. There's some great fights to make there for Costello, and he's done the right thing by Australian fight fans and made good case for himself as a human being and a sportsman by returning to do the job he set out to do back in October last year. Part of being an athlete is especially if you're doing a weight descent like Costello's, is that the immune system gets run down, and it's often that fighters come in feeling unwell, or it's super uncommon to come in without an injury. I know Martinez had an injury to his knee coming into this, quite a significant one, and I think if you ask most fighters on the show that night, if they were coming in 100%, they'd have a list of complaints that looked like belonged in Hogwarts on an ancient piece of parchment. But if that was the case and he was hindered in that in any way, I'd love to see him back at 100% health. That'd be cool. But yeah, for Martinez, what's next, or who bloody knows? But I'm signing up to watch.
Yeah, it's David Martinez is kind of in a really interesting position. It's something that I thought about after the fight. When you look at the accolades that he has, when you look at the accomplishments that he's got, now being a 3-time Eternal MMA champion, and now with a record of 15-6, 31 years of age, he's just kind of like sort of right kind of on that point of what is next. Is there something else, beyond Australia in terms of opportunities for him if he wants to fight international? But, like on that, he's not really ever been, at least in recent memory, someone that's even kind of called for that. He's humble in his approach. He's been asked at times in interviews, like, do you think about the UFC next? He's like, look, I just want to fight one fight at a time. We'll see what comes next. So he's not sort of calling for his own shots or anything like that. But I mean, everything he's putting together, especially recently, you look at the list of guys that he's been in the cage with and gotten the job done over, and now moving up to welterweight and capturing the title after he's been a 2-time Eternal MMA lightweight champion. And adding this now to his resume, like what does come next for him? Like, yeah, there'll always be fights for him here to kind of go through, but he's fought so many guys here already. Like, it'd be so interesting. I don't know. I actually don't know, like, what's in his mind in terms of, like, does he have aspirations for Contender Series, UFC in general, like more international opportunities? Like, only he could sort of really answer that. He's certainly an interesting cat. I've spoken to David many times. One thing to touch on the fight as well. I mean, there's not too many, to speak to the character of the guy, there's not too many fights that sort of go by with David Martinez where you don't see a classic David Martinez moment in terms of his humble character, whether that's after the fight, whether that's during the fight, that nice little round of applause for him picking up the mouthpiece himself and handing it back to Stephen Costello, and just giving the little praise symbol there with his hands and that sort of thing. Like, just a great dude outside of the cage and just a killer inside of the cage. And I'm glad you touched on the growth that he's making in terms of his striking game now that he's training at Team Compton Training Center, because you're seeing just more levels to his game kind of coming through, and it's putting him in this position where, again, it's like, is there something more for him in his future? It'd be really interesting to see. I hope so, because he certainly deserves it. But look, David Martinez, I just want to say one of the truly great representatives for Eternal MMA, always comes to put on a show. Like, just a great character, great fighter, a great human being. So whatever comes next for him, all the best to David Martinez. I'm sure he's down for whatever comes next. That's just the David Martinez way. But again, just to follow on with Stephen Costello, as you said, great to see him come back and try to get the job done that he was supposed to when he was supposed to fight against Eldon Bates last year. Obviously, Eldon Bates missing weight. That fight couldn't come through. That fight didn't materialize. But Stephen Costello gets back over here, tries to come through. Like you said, not too many fighters are coming in feeling 100%. But if he was dealing with that nasty chest infection, and look, again, I'm not a fighter. I don't see how many guys are coming in with chest infections or colds or, some kind of ailment, but, just the optics of it from what I've seen and what he showed me, it did look like it was pretty nasty. And he did make mention that he was struggling to breathe in the early parts of the fights. He wanted to come in, he wanted to put it on and see how it kind of goes. So testament to him. He was a great human being to talk to. Good dude, full of respect for David Martinez, and certainly had no intention of taking anything away from David's fight. That's just what he was dealing with. But that was a hell of a way to wrap up another Eternal show, man, on the in Sydney. Eternal 92. 9 fights, but 9 great fights. Like, there wasn't really any of those fights that I don't think were entertaining at all. There was no snoozes on there. But, I mean, that's the Eternal MMA way, man. We don't get too many snoozes in Eternal MMA. It set us up very nicely for UFC 312 the next day that you attended, where we got to see some more former Eternal MMA talent on display. You were there in the crowd. Like, how was the show, man? Like, Kudos Bank Arena, it's rocking. I've been there once before. Just an absolute feast for Eternal or MMA fans in Australia to get to see Eternal MMA one night and then see the UFC the next day with a bunch of former Eternal champions, representatives. What a weekend.
Yeah, dude, the Kudos Bank Arena itself is sick. And, the preliminary card, if you're an Australian MMA fan, of course, you're going to be all about it. There's some critiques of the main card internationally. People felt it lacked star power for a pay-per-view, whether it did or it didn't. The prelim card was probably more so what I was there to watch. I think as far as Australian crowds go, I think Sydney would probably be at the lower end of that energy-wise. I'd probably give like the Sydney crowd there about like a 6 out of 10. Like they were good at times, but they needed a lot of piss to actually warm up into the fights. Australian crowds are always good. But I felt like the crowd took a while to kind of warm up to it. Maybe it was the fact that beers were $17, which is typical Sydney. But man, it was so cool to be there. I had some great seats, was able to get a good view of the action both in the cage and, look around the crowd. It was cool to see so many Australian MMA heads there, both young and old, and get to talk to fans of Eternal MMA and stuff around the place. It was really cool. Good day.
Yeah, we had 2 former Eternal MMA champions. Excuse me as my voice starts to go a little bit here. 2 former Eternal MMA champions on that card. That you talk about looking forward to the prelims first and foremost. I mean, I was in the same boat. You talk about not the casual fan, but I mean the fans are just kind of the UFC that aren't necessarily entrenched in the local scene here. Obviously a little bit disgruntled by the fact that we didn't have a lot of the perceived name power on the card, and I totally understand that. Look, just for me, I'll watch cards like this every day of the week because to see some of the guys that have come through Eternal MMA and get themselves to these points, I'll always look forward to that, more than the bigger names and that sort of thing, because it's just so cool to get to know these guys and see their journey and see where they're going to go. And like Quillen Soulkilled, just the epitome of that, right? Like the former Eternal MMA lightweight champion, on an absolute tear right now, a guy that lost his opening pro fight, doesn't lose since then, puts on performance after performance for Eternal MMA, capturing the lightweight belt, goes into this fight against Anshul Jubilee, gets the job done with a round 1 KO. I talked to Quillen before the fight on the podcast and asked him what, the perfect weekend, how it's going to end up being a perfect weekend for him. What's it going to take to say that was just the absolute way to wrap up his debut? And he said, going back home with an extra 50K in his pocket after getting the job done by finish. And he did exactly that. So look, I couldn't be happier for the man. Quillen Soulkilled, just a hell of a human being, incredible fighter, incredibly entertaining inside and outside the cage. We had obviously Tom Nolan as well, former Eternal MMA lightweight. He's going from strength to strength, going up against a guy I struggle to pronounce the dude's name.
Borshev.
Borshow, I actually think it is, from what I heard on there. It's Borshow. And that could be John Anik getting that wrong, but I'm not going to test him on it. But apparently that's how you pronounce it.
Anik's pretty good with the pronunciation.
He's pretty good.
He's the GOAT in that regard.
Yeah, so I'll take his lead on that one. Unfortunately, Jack Jenkins doesn't come up against, doesn't get the job done against Gabriel Santos. But he had
nasty injury is the word coming out of that camp.
Yeah,
pretty close to that camp.
What was that? Something about something in his neck or something? He had an air leak in his chest or something?
So he got hit with an elbow at the end of the first round. It's an injury kind of up behind his jaw, and he started getting this kind of air build up in his neck and lost. He couldn't feel his left arm coming into the next round. So, and against a guy like Santos, bro, like that guy at the moment, he wasn't really on anyone's radar. I think this loss for Jenkins is going to age very well in 2 or 3 years. So I think that Santos guy is.
Dude, I was worried at the weigh-ins, man. Like when I saw them like coming up against each other at the ceremonial weigh-ins, and I saw the physique of Santos and the size of him, I'm like, oh shit! Like, I got faith in Jack, but I was like, this is gonna be a tough fight for Jack.
Yeah. And that's what he wanted. Jack can absolutely beat that guy. Clean him up with the head kick. That was the plan, low kick, and then come up high. And, it's a shame that he didn't that he sustained that injury, but life goes on, and so does Jack Jenkins.
So does Jack Jenkins, indeed. We'll just about wrap it up here, man. But keen to get your thoughts on just even like the main card. Obviously, it was Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. Entertaining fight. How did you like that, man? Because I
left in the third round. I left in the third round. I could just see the way it was going. Could tell Sean wasn't going to.
You wanted to beat traffic.
Fire up. Yeah, dude, there was 18,000 people there trying to get overpriced Ubers back to the CBD. Our Uber back was $125 for a 15-minute ride. It's crazy out there.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But kind of saw the writing on the wall. Saw Strickland wasn't going to fight back too hard, and that du Plessis was going to do his thing. Enjoyed Weili Zhang. She's become a massive crowd favorite,
hasn't she?
For Australia. That was dominant victory. Did what she had to do. Some other fun fights. The card. Awesome to see my friend Jake Matthews get up against Prado. Probably earned his shot to get back in the top 15. Probably Australia's longest standing UFC vet. Jimmy Crute, the Bendigo bomber, landed some big old bombs. So good to see him back having fun, man. One of my old sparring partners, giving me plenty of CTE over there. So yeah, it was really cool to see the Aussies getting up.
No, fantastic representation right across the board for Australian MMA on 2 days, like we said, for Eternal 92 and UFC 312. A lot of the Eternal boys and a lot of the Australian guys at large. The scene is just growing like absolute crazy here. I think like pound for pound. Talked about this before, pound for pound for the population that we have here and the scene that we have here, like we're right up there with the best of them, and we're showing that
100%
card to card, man. Like it can only go up from here. And with Eternal MMA leading the way and producing the talent that we're seeing coming through, like we said, guys like Sebastian Salai, like who knows what happens with David Martinez, and all the way down to guys like Chris Ustianovsky and some of those other boys, like too many to mention, but the scene's in good hands right now, mate. Eternal MMA is certainly the forefront of that. So I'm looking forward to what we've got coming up next. We've got Eternal 93 is the next one to look forward to. That's only in a couple of short weeks. I think it is, 10 days away? Like,
it's next weekend, man. I started my prep today.
Yeah.
5 million fights on the prelims, so that's me this week.
Struggling to keep up,
heading
man.
Up to Perth.
Oh, my God. They just keep churning them out. But, I mean, hey, listen, I'm not going to complain about fights being churned out for Eternal MMA. So, Anthony Drillich chops that one against now Brian Hislop, I think, was a Scottish fighter. He had a change of opponent there. For that one, the returning Anthony Drillich in the flyweight division after he was unsuccessful with his Dana White Contender Series debut there. So we'll see if he can bounce back for that one. A lot of fights that you can check out on eternalmma.com if you're a Perth person and you're going to the now reformed Perth HPC is what it's now called. It's no longer the HBF Stadium, Perth, Western Australia. It's the Perth HPC. So get yourself some tickets.
Stuff that up.
Yeah, I got told about it the other day and I'm like, that's a tongue twister. So, but Perth HPC is where it's at. Love the Perth crowds. Big card for Eternal 93. We keep this thing ticking over. Probably do another card breakdown at some point if we get the time. I'd imagine, if we get the time. Well, it's only a week and a half away, so we'll check back. We'll see if we can get it done. But, hey, it's Eternal 93 coming up, UFC Fight Pass. Good things continue to happen.